Robert King.
Here.
I'm here. Diane Cervello. Carla Morano.
Here.
Paul Swenson. I think he said he was going to be absent.
He was going to be.
Mary Cronin.
Here.
And we also heard from Mary Comstock.
Correct. That she was not going to be here tonight. And could I ask that the minutes from the last meeting be read?
Sure, certainly. The last meeting was on March 24th, 2008, in this room, room 3C, City Hall. At that meeting, the commission had a discussion and unanimously accepted the minutes from the prior meeting on March 10th. The commission heard and accepted input from the public by Joel Yurch, Lynn Waller, and Margaret Mitchell. The commission unanimously agreed to add as a discussion item Mr. David St. Hilaire to address the issue of bonding. He offered some proposed language to modify Section 7-10 about the bonding. The commission then discussed and voted to approve changing the language of 7-10 by simply inserting $2.5 million instead of the existing amount of $500,000. The vote was, at that time, was 4 in favor and 2 opposed. The commission discussed the need to examine any city entity that might be created by a special act of the state legislature. The commission proceeded and had a discussion reviewing Chapter 1 of the Charter, and then unanimously voted to add a preamble to the Charter, and unanimously voted to take out of the Charter a lengthy property description that was located in Section 1-2 and replace it by a reference to a map that will be on file with the town clerk. And the commission finally discussed a proposal for scheduling future topics to be reviewed and decided by the commission in advance, so we can decide on the sort of a basic agenda further along. And we approved the plan to disseminate a progress report to city officials and the public. Those are the minutes of the last meeting.
Any corrections to the minutes?
Just a question.
Yes. Mr. King?
Was the public announcement made? Was that issued to the Common Council? And
I did not do that.
You
no.
did not do that?
So that will be a topic that we can clean up tonight.
What, his failure to do that?
Yes, I think so. Okay.
I don't think we discussed who was going to do that. Which member of the
I
commission
thought
was
you
going to disseminate the report.
Hearing no corrections to the minutes other than little tidying up, we'll accept them as read. Now we would like to hear from members of the public that might want to address us. Anybody interested? Mr. Urice?
Thank you, Commissioners. The main topic I'd like to talk about this evening is the proposal on the planning and zoning recommendations. But before that, I get that, I'd kind of like to correct some testimony I'd given before related to the non-referendum bond issues. I had stated in the past, at least in recent memory, the last 20 years, no mayor had administered those bonds as anything but an annual limit. And I think some comment was made to that effect when the motion was made at your last meeting, that from a practical standpoint, that was probably true. No other language may need to be changed. Subsequent to that, we were presented with the annual budget from this year, in which there were five $500,000 or close to $500,000 bond type issues which would not require a referendum vote by the people of Danbury. These are commitments for 20 years, not commitments that we can change by changing the budget vote with a new administration and every 2 years. So I would ask that you reopen that topic at some point during your deliberations and again make that an annual limit. The argument for the multiple bond issues this year, while it's valid, so the $500,000 is not enough, and that's why the number is before you. But in fact, we know that you can go multiple projects, as council has stated in the past, and regardless of what has happened in recent history, we don't know what any administration is going to do under the current $2.5 million that will be changed. That could be just as well be $22.5 million with 10 projects, or $45 million with 20 projects if they're sent through a little at a time. Now on to your topic of the planning and zoning recommendations. As some of you may know, I've been serving on the Planning Commission for a couple of years, and at least associated with it for about 2.5 years as either a full standing commissioner or as an alternate. And the recommendation coming from the planning director, Mr. Elprin, while I respect his knowledge and background in this topic and zoning regulations, I respectfully totally disagree with this recommendation. There are a number of reasons. You're going to hear arguments tonight, if they follow along with the recommendation letter, how the combination will streamline the process, give ownership to the plan of conservation and development to a unified body, and take out some requirements that one commission has in relation to another to refer zoning changes over to the Planning Commission. I contend that the separation is better for Danbury than the combination. Arguments made that a number of towns around the area do combine their zoning and planning commissions, and they're all pretty small towns: Bridgewater, Ridgefield, Newtown, which have, if you just go observe those towns, relatively light development activities. And so what the commission has to do and consider on any given meeting night is somewhat limited in relationship to a town like Danbury, which is being heavily developed at this time and probably will continue to be as Danbury has a population base that makes it very favorable for industry to come in, and a fairly good school system makes it an attractive place for families to move, and it's very commutable down to the northern Westchester business community, which is why I actually settled here. And the other argument, there are larger towns like Hartford, Bridgeport, West Hartford, that have combined these successfully. Well, I would challenge that assumption. Look at Hartford, look at Bridgeport, and do you want Danbury to look like that? I think not. Danbury has a quaintness about it, and by separating or maintaining the separation of zoning and planning, you have one body is looking more strategic, that's at the zoning and areas of the town, whereas the Planning Commission is more of a tactical to make sure that what is actually going in these zones are suitable for that zone and those neighborhoods. A perfect example would have been the last Planning Commission. There was a proposal for a waste transfer station over in an industrial zone, which butted up against a public housing authority, right where people live. If you just look at zoning regulations, there's a perfectly legitimate use of that land. But if you look at the overall lay of that project as it impacted the people living in the area, it was not a suitable plan, and it was denied on those bases. It took hours and hours of public testimony, applicant testimony, internal analysis of that project to come to that conclusion. It was literally the largest denial I've ever seen, 21 pages long. If you start combining zoning issues and planning issues and expect volunteers to put that workload on one commission, now you've got a commission that runs, what, a year and a half, 2 years, whatever, and you're in here twice a month, like each of these commissions are. Can you imagine being in here 4 times a month to get that work done? And many, many nights, I can speak for the Planning Commission, I can't speak for zoning, we have run till 9:30, 10:30, 11, and in some cases after midnight, just to get the limited agenda when there is a lot of public input to a project. I fear that combining these two commissions will have just the opposite effect that is desired in this recommendation for the planning director. It will be difficult to find people who are willing to commit that much time to doing the job right, or the other alternative is the combined commission will not spend the time necessary to do the job right. So I return back to the small towns that do, the big towns that do. The small towns are a different environment than the big towns. We don't want to look like those big towns. And there was one comment in here about you would eliminate the need to refer a zoning change to the planning commission for a 30-day report, whether they thumbs up or thumbs down. That is a very subtle but very important check on the zoning commission. If the planning commission gives it a negative recommendation for a zoning change, generally that's because we don't think it's in line with plan of conservation development, or that is appropriate for that neighborhood. It requires the zoning commission to have a supermajority to pass that zoning change. That's very, very important. Subtle, but very important. If we get them a thumbs up, then they can pass it with a simple majority. I think that is a check and balance that we do not want to lose in the town of Danbury. And I guess the final item I wanted to say about that is going back to the staffing issue of these commissions. By and large, the commissions and all elected officials, with the exception of 4, are volunteers. You are, I am, other people serving in those commissions are taking out of our personal time because, quite frankly, we give a damn about this city. You want good people to serve on all these commissions, and if you create a situation where you're overtaxing them, while it might be more streamlined in the back room, I think you're going to be taking stuff out of the eye of the public, and I think it's going to result in a lower quality of personnel that's going to staff these positions just because of the time commitments. That's my pitch for today.
Any questions or comments from anybody? Thank you. Other members of the public?
Yes.
Lynn, you can sit there.
That's right. He said a lot of what I wanted to say, but since I spent all afternoon working on it, I'm going to say it anyway. My name is Lynn Waller. I live at 83 Highland Avenue. One of the things I wanted to bring to your attention, I'd like you to add a sentence to the charter that it shall be looked at, if necessary, and revised every 10 years or so that we don't go from 1977 until 2009 before we look at the charter. There is nothing in the present charter that asks you to do that. I don't care which administration is in. I just think we should have some kind of a timetable, like they have the entities committees, that sunsets committees if they feel they aren't doing anything. I just think that we ought to look at this every now and then and bring it up, so we're not talking about a figure 25 years ago that they can bond. So I think that would be a wise place to put it, that it would force the issue. Again, Joel mentioned the ordinance is $500,000 without going to the people. This is wrong. Please put a cap on how often any mayor can ask for $2.5 million in an ordinance without going to the public. I know you didn't think this would happen, but it just did, and I want you to reconsider before it happens with an increased amount. Please, please open this and look at it again. You're driving seniors out of this town with the increases in bonding and with the increases in our taxes, so somebody's got to try to get some control over this. Planning and zoning. I do not believe this recommendation is good for the majority of the people in Danbury. It will help developers who push items through quickly. Frequently the meetings are missed, frequently the public misses legal notices, and they don't realize what's happening. If you're not an abutting property owner, you are not notified something that may be going on in your own neighborhood. and you may need to know about it. If it goes before 2 commissions and the newspaper covers it as an article, or if it's big enough, someone else may write an article about it, and then more of the public hears about it. They have another shot at speaking, whether it's before zoning or before planning. And if it affects them, separately, the public may get a chance to speak. Together, the public, if you put both commissions together, the public loses as far as I'm concerned. The only people who win are the developers. Think 2 of the commissioners. They already pull long nights, hearings on all the applications. Sometimes they are there till after midnight. By combining the commissions, they will have to do twice the work on any given night. They will be, will the meetings be weekly? Will they have compensation for their workload increases? I also don't believe it will help the electoral process, as today voters are not sure who is running or what their qualifications are, and you're putting them in for a longer period of time. I know other towns have combined the P and Z, but they are all much smaller than we are. Do we really want to be a Bridgeport or a Hartford or a New Haven? I don't. If terms are staggered, when will they elect a new chairman? The commission gets together and elects a chairman. At what year are they going to elect a chairman? If you make changes, the changes presented tonight, I ask that you be sure that the new board is elected and not appointed. That puts too much power in the hands of any one mayor, whether male or female, I don't care, but it's too much power in one person if they're appointed. They really need to be elected. I also ask that you attend the commission's meeting to assess the work that they do before making these changes. Recently, the Planning Commission heard an application on the trash transfer station. The public who attended and wanted to speak had to wait until after 10 p.m. to be able to address the commission. This happened 3 different evenings. Many of the people went home early without being able to speak because of family commitments. I fear if you put planning and zoning together, that will happen more often and the public will be just shut out. Please be careful what you do. Danbury citizens depend on you to choose wisely for them and not grease the path for the developers and the city employees. Thank you.
Questions? Comments? Okay. Would anyone else like to address us? Mrs. Mitchell.
I came up third. My name's Margaret Mitchell. It's so much easier when you just say ditto. I won't go through all of that again. I would prefer that you revisit the bonding, because none of us thought that it would happen, that you'd have numerous bond ordinances a year, and it turns out we were wrong, and that the language needs to be tightened up. I think that our planning and zoning people are burdened, and I was here until after midnight on the MSW thing, but maybe that's because I stood in the hall for a few minutes afterwards. I don't know how, if they'd had a whole bunch more to deal with on an agenda, anyone, it's too much to ask of volunteers, simply. I wrote a letter on my pet peeve, which is not really what you're covering tonight, but it's section 7.4, the duties of the Common Council on the budget. And it does say in here that following receipt of the estimates from the mayor, the council shall cause sufficient copies of said estimates to be made available for general distribution in the office of the city clerk. This simply hasn't happened in a very long time. The city clerk says that the council hasn't directed her to make any copies or any summaries, and that may be true. I don't know. It's sort of catch-22. There are budgets available in the finance director's office, but if you go to the finance director's office, he says this is not my responsibility. You need to go back up to the city clerk. So you wind up in a frustrating thing of running up and down the stairs trying to get a budget. I wrote the letter to the editor of the newspaper, and I also encouraged people to come in here and speak. I wish some more people would come. Certainly, Joel Rice, Lynn Waller, and I sit for hours in these public meetings, and we do have opinions, but I sure wish other people would come in, because I think they probably have very constructive ideas. And this is the Constitution of the city, and this is our charter, and it gives us our rights and our privileges and our responsibilities, and it's so key to our city. And I want you to leave in this provision 7-4 as it is, but I would like it to function better. And nothing says you couldn't charge a small fee. If I was a person that's good with a computer, has access to a computer, it would cost me ink, it would cost me paper. Nothing in the ordinance says, the charter says you couldn't charge me a small fee for printing and paper. And I just think soon maybe you won't need this at all now that the budget's on the web. But as long as there's some senior citizens around or some people that don't have enough money to own a computer, it would be very nice. It would be a very limited number of copies that the clerk would have to make. But when I was a child, they made these copies, and it was a very small fee to cover printing and paper, and I thought that was very fair, and I used to walk over and get them from my grandmother. And if it was good enough then, if we feel this way about taxation and our rights to speak about it and see the revenue estimates and see the budget proposals, isn't that how our country started, about taxation without review of the proposal? Thank you very much.
Comment. I don't
Can I
think
ask a
this...
question?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Ms. Mitchell, you handed us just so I
Not your ordinance, your charter.
just want to make sure we have the right stuff on including.
Yeah, it's just, I just decided there was no point in trying to write a second thing about this issue, but I wanted to tell you that I'd like you to leave that in there, even though it isn't implemented successfully.
Comment. I think this falls outside the scope of the commission in terms of enforcement of
It
this.
does.
So I would suggest that maybe you contact the mayor's office, or maybe our council here could help you out in that matter.
Thank you.
Okay?
Would anyone else like to address us?
I
Sir?
don't think we can enforce everybody.
Real quick, is the position for city clerk coming up today?
No,
No.
not.
I'll hold my opinions for the next time then.
I'm sorry, could
Al
you give
Robbins.
us your name?
Al Robinson, 182 Osborne Street. I'm going to be real brief. I do not think, and I strongly, strongly, strongly oppose combining planning and zoning. I think it is, just hearing that it's going to be done is just laughable, to say the least. I have been at several planning meetings, planning meeting for the Dunkin' Donuts on the corner of Springside and Osborne Street. Took a long, long period of time to get that done. Transfer station, I went to every one of those meetings and I recorded those meetings. I saw members of the public who stayed around to 11:30. Ms. Waller is correct. They stayed around for as long as they could. Parents with kids waiting to get their opportunity to get up there and speak. And if you combine planning and zoning in a city this size, you're going to overburden the people who are just basically volunteers they're not getting paid to do this. You're just going to overburden them with a lot of work, and I just think it's unnecessary. And I think it's also, please take the time, go to these meetings, see how long it takes, see how much work it takes to get these things done. I was at a zoning meeting last week where Hallis is asking for a zoning amendment to a parcel of land. My goodness, that must have went on for at least an hour and a half to maybe 2 hours, and it's being continued to the next meeting. When you're dealing with planning and zoning in a city like this where people are really upset about overdevelopment, or what I like to call irresponsible development, breaking these things up is better than to have all this stuff clumped together, such as I think Ridgefield has a planning and zoning combined together, and I hear at times that's a nightmare. So please think before you make a decision like that.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, let's move on with our agenda then. And first item on the agenda will be Mr. Alpern discussing Planning and Zoning Commission and all the input.
Really?
Yeah.
Can I join you?
Yes, yeah.
Please pull a chair up.
Thank you all. Let me begin by saying that the proposal that you have before you is not my proposal. It is a proposal of the Planning Commission of the City of Danbury. No, Joel, you weren't on then.
Come on, guys.
Joel wasn't on then, but those who were supported this 100%. We also met with the Zoning Commission, and the Zoning Commission supported it. And then we went to Common Council, even though I don't believe by statute we had to, and they supported it as well. This is the plan of development out of which this proposal came. And the reasons for the proposal were discussed in my memorandum to you. And the reasons I think were spelled out. I gave you a verbatim copy of the provisions in the plan of development that relate to this. There were, of course, comments that I made regarding other communities that have combined planning and zoning commissions. And these examples were criticized because the towns were either too large or too small. Believe me, Danbury is not Hartford, it's not Bridgeport, it's not New Haven, I agree. But the reasons it's not have nothing to do with whether or not you have a combined planning and zoning commission. There are economic issues, for example, and they come to bear that are they're way far heavier. Stamford, if we want to continue this argument, Stamford is booming. Stamford is doing quite well, regardless of whether or not it had a combined planning and zoning commission. West Hartford is, as it was mentioned, is larger than Danbury. Actually, West Hartford is smaller than Danbury. It's got about 60,000 people. They are completing a new redevelopment area called the Blueback development. I don't know how many of you had an opportunity to see it, but if you haven't, I would strongly urge that you go, because they have done a wonderful job in that regard. But all of these things, I don't believe, can be tied to whether or not a town has combined planning and zoning commissions. I think we're talking here about administration. Yes, the Planning Commission does have long meetings. Their meetings typically last a whole lot longer than zoning commissions. Indeed, the Zoning Commission has missed a number of meetings this year because there simply wasn't anything on the agenda. So while we could anticipate some increase in responsibility, I don't think it's going to be quite as arduous as it was made out to be.
Excuse me, Mr. Elperman, I don't want to interfere with your presentation, but some of us really don't have an understanding of what the difference is between the two and what the different roles are, how a project would come before both commissions.
Well, they typically don't. The Planning Commission spends, I would estimate, 75-80% of its time on what we call special exceptions. Special exception is a use that is allowed in the zoning district, but it is put in a category where it may not necessarily be appropriate for any particular lot in that district. Okay. So it comes before the Planning Commission for the Planning Commission to make that determination, and along with it comes an attendant site plan, which they review. And they also review subdivisions. Now, there are a lot of other things they do as well, but these take up most of their time. The Zoning Commission typically and primarily handle requests for amendments to the zoning regulations and amendments to the zoning map or rezonings. Again, they do other things as well, but that's the main, I say the main responsibility that they have.
Thank you. Dennis, how often does the Planning Commission meet?
Twice a month.
Twice a month.
Sometimes they have a special meeting, but typically twice a month.
Okay. And I think I understand zoning. If I've got a piece of property and it's zoned for one thing and I want to put a movie theater on it, maybe I've got to get the zone
Right.
changed.
Or you may want to amend the language so that would allow you to do that without rezoning the land.
Okay, so without rezoning, is that when the Planning Commission would be involved?
In either case, they're referred to the Planning Commission for a review and recommendation.
Okay. And reviews are based upon what? Traffic impacts, noise impacts, or none of that?
Probably all of the above.
Okay.
But I think the major consideration for the Planning Commission is, does it comply with the Plan of Conservation and Development?
And how old is that plan?
That was adopted in 2002.
Okay. And how is it reviewed by statute on a?
It is supposed to be reviewed every 10 years.
Okay.
Can you explain a little bit more about that plan of conservation? Is that a City of Danbury document, or is that a State of Connecticut document? Or?
It's a city document.
Okay.
And it is it lays out a blueprint for the future growth and development of the city.
I guess I don't understand why is planning so busy then? If we have the blueprint.
Because Planning Commission, and this is true for planning commissions throughout Connecticut, handle, I think, without, for fear of being criticized for overgeneralizing, so much of their work is involved with special exceptions and their site plan review. That takes up an enormous amount of their time. And there are, from time to time, particularly controversial projects that come in, like the transfer station, that tend to go and drag on from one meeting to the next.
And why was that a planning issue?
Here?
Yes. Why was the transfer station a planning issue and not primarily a zoning issue?
Because it was a special exception.
And an exception to what?
You have, for each zone, you have a list of uses which are permitted and a list of uses which are special exceptions. All the special exceptions go to the Planning Commission.
Okay.
All right? And the Planning Commission must approve those. If they're not special exceptions, it's simply administered by the staff. And the staff reviews the site plans and takes action on those. I would say approximately 80% of all the site plans that come into the city go no further than the departmental level.
Because they are not an exception
Exactly.
to what's already there.
Right.
And the zoning commission can overrule the planning commission with a supermajority, is that? did I
On
understand?
rezoning matters or
On
amendments
rezone.
to the regs.
Okay.
The zoning commission has the final say on the zoning map, its boundaries of various districts, and the language in the regulations. The way it is now, because you have two commissions, it's referred to the planning commission first. They have 35 days in which to issue a comment on it, whether they're in favor of it or opposed to it. And if they are opposed to it, then it takes a supermajority for the zoning commission to override if they wish to approve.
So the zoning people, who are the elected people, can override
Yes.
the planning commission, which is an appointed board?
Right.
Okay.
With a supermajority, right?
Yeah.
And they can do that whether or not it agrees with the plan of conservation.
Yes. And they have.
So they can just totally ignore
Yes.
that document.
Yes.
Seems to present a check and balance system. Why would we want to change that?
Why does it?
I don't think it is a check and balance, because it's not as though you have to get approval from both bodies. You don't.
You can get away with simply going to the elected board and getting a
That's all you
supermajority.
need. That's all you need.
Okay, but if we don't do, now if we combine it into...
The Planning Commission's recommendation is purely advisory.
Okay, so planning,
So it has no bearing on the actual
They,
decision.
well, and whether or not it's going to be a simple or a supermajority, but that's the extent of it. Nor can Planning Commission members come and address the Zoning Commission and speak their piece.
you cannot, or you simply don't?
They cannot by law.
Okay.
I can, because I'm lowly staffed, but they can. So if they really feel strongly about something, they still can't come and speak.
And planning is purely volunteer,
It's purely what?
volunteer membership?
Yeah, they both are, but in the sense that although the zoning commission members are elected, but neither get paid.
But if we put it into one, then it's going to be one elected body
Right.
that will be making all the decisions.
Exactly.
Without the advisory position of the planning board, not a separate advisory opinion.
Well,
And if I'm a developer, all I need to do is get a majority on the new planning and zoning commission
that's all you need now.
to change. Well, but at least we would get to alert you that I wanted to build something next to the high school, and you would have, the planning commission would have the right to say, you know what, we don't agree with this, we don't think it's with our plan, and then I've got to at least have a supermajority
Yeah,
to
but I-
overrule
Yeah,
your good opinion.
but understand that in the real world, far more important than the Planning Commission's recommendation, and Joel's not going to like this, is the reports from the staff and what the public says at the hearings. They carry far more weight. Because what we get from the Planning Commission is usually a one-page document that says we either approve or we disapprove, and sometimes some reasons. And that's what they say.
I'm kind of hearing that the public doesn't feel that they have much input there. Do they not have public session at the beginning of their meetings? That's not a requirement.
Or
Zoning?
They
I mean,
do.
I hear people say they're here till 11 o'clock at night and they didn't get a chance to speak.
That's planning.
Well, when the Planning Commission has a special exceptions, those are public hearings.
Okay.
All right, the public is invited to come and speak. Every time the Zoning Commission wishes to change or amend the zoning regulations, whether it's a rezoning of land or a change in the language, they have to hold a public hearing. When a referral comes from the Zoning Commission to the Planning Commission for their input, there is no public hearing.
And there's no opportunity for the public to address.
No.
That's interesting.
Although more
Referred to
often,
the planning commission would hold a meeting.
oh, it's done at their regular meeting.
Then
Yeah.
the public would have an input at that meeting.
No, they don't.
They do not.
No. Not on these referrals.
Does anyone else have any?
What do we have that prevents either one of these bodies from going against the plan of development?
None. The way which is why I'm here, because I think that you have a far better chance of implementing the plan of development, which is adopted, pursuant to a public hearing, by the way, if the people making that decision are the people who adopted it. Right now, it's adopted by the Planning Commission, not by the Zoning Commission. We tried to get a buy-in, but we're not totally successful. But under state law, zoning does not have to comply with the plan. Well,
So why do we have a plan?
Peter is over there grinning.
He does that a lot. so
It is,
don't let that make you nervous.
it is the bane of professional planners throughout America.
Yeah, that's,
Let me tell you.
And why go through this whole effort of setting up a plan of development if your zoning commission
Well,
can do what they
there
please anyway?
there are many aspects of that plan that have nothing to do with zoning regulations.
You know, Dennis, the thing about the way it is now is there's a potential for the public to have two hearings on any particular project, a lightning rod project. Would that be correct?
No. When it's referred to the planning commission, there's no public hearing.
So your proposal...
If you're talking about it, we're talking about a zoning amendment or rezoning. It's referred to planning. Planning does not hold public hearings.
On those?
No, they don't.
Okay.
And those who are, I've never heard the public complain about that as much as I've heard developers complain about it. They want to have their chance to get up and talk for an hour and make their pitch to the planning commission, yes.
Now, the zoning commission, if there's an issue that's coming up, there's a public
Here.
participation, public hearing.
Oh, sure.
On any changes.
Absolutely.
So if we want to make sure the public is aware, then maybe we need to make sure that we have a better communications.
Yeah, and that is, first of all, let me say, I am a strong believer in public hearings. Because you can indeed fight City Hall. I'm not so sure how much power you have to fight Congress. Try walking down on the floor of Congress to argue against a bill, or Hartford, for that matter. But you can't come down to City Hall, public hearings, and voice your opinion on issues. I think, and the reason why I work for local government, it's a choice, is because I think this is where democracy is strongest. That doesn't mean everybody gets their way. Doesn't mean it's perfect. But I think it's strongest. It's the strongest level of government in terms of public involvement. I cannot walk down the street and go to lunch without somebody running into me and saying, what about this or what about that? And neither can the mayor. And council members. I get phone calls all the time. We can't. Because we live here. We're part of the community. And I think that what this, and I am surprised at some of the comments in opposition to this, it extends the electoral process to include those who are going to make these decisions. Now, that electoral process, to be successful, requires more than just an election, whether it's 2 years or 4 years or whatever. It requires, first of all, party discipline. The political parties select good people to run. Now, what are good people? Well, reasonably bright, well-motivated people, people without conflicts of interest. That's their responsibility. It requires a media which is going to cover meetings. But not just meetings for issues, particularly hot-button issues that come up from time to time, but the elections themselves. When was the last time you saw an in-depth analysis of the candidates for the zoning commission and what their views are on subjects? Al was up here talking about overdevelopment. Why can't the newspaper just ask candidates, what are your feelings on overdevelopment? Just leave it a wide open question, see how they respond. So instead, how do people vote? Well, you vote for somebody because you know them, or a friend of yours knows him and says, well, he's a good guy. You vote for party line, or maybe even ethnicity. We see that too in Danbury. That's why I think that's the major reason people make this selection. And the third thing you need is an informed and interested public. not just for a project in their neighborhood, although that's perfectly understandable, but for what's going on citywide. And there are times we've had proposals, and I always enjoy seeing it happen when somebody gets up, they don't live in the area, but they live in Danbury, and they're concerned about the overall development in Danbury, and there are people like that. So you need those things, not just, an election every couple of years.
So this proposal that you were kind enough to put in writing and submit to us, okay, does that allow for participation you just outlined to us in the last few minutes?
In terms of?
In terms of public participation, in terms of fighting City Hall, in terms of coming...
Well, it allows fighting City
and
Hall in terms of public hearings. Those remain. Those are all mandated by the Connecticut General Statutes. I think the one regret I have is that the announcements in the paper are always so small that they're so easy to overlook. Now, there used to be a time, many years ago, when the News Times had a designated reporter for City Hall. And they had a responsibility. They had to do an article a day and a story for Sunday. Wouldn't you believe they were always in our office looking for material. What's coming up? What's happening? We don't have that anymore. All you have is this little announcement, that shows up. It costs $30,000 a year to publish those out of my budget. I suppose we could make them a lot bigger, but then the budget would go a lot higher. But
Could you hold on a minute?
And understand that a lot of issues that come before either commission don't have a lot of public input there, although from time to time we get a whopper like whether it's Dunkin' Donuts or the transfer station that are quite controversial. But a lot of stuff isn't.
Dennis, is it your view that if this combined commission, they would be elected, or would they be appointed?
This shows them as elected.
What would be the benefit of either?
Well, let me start by saying that this was the mayor's prerogative, his choice. I think there are benefits for each. The biggest benefit being elected is that the public gets a voice. Mm-hmm. And yes, there are cases around the country where zoning commissions have been thrown out on their ear because of decisions they've made. But again, that requires that you have good candidates who run, as I've defined that.
So then the benefit is that they're elected?
They're elected,
Disadvantage is they couldn't have not the expertise or the knowledge to deal with the issues in front of them?
That's always an issue, whether they're appointed or elected.
But if there's appointment, you can go through a process that would assure...
They're appointed by the mayor.
But still,
and
a mayor
affirmed by common council.
Right, so you do have a confirmation process there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, elections, like you said, it's hard in some cases to get people to run for office in communities, given the amount of commitment to it. Mm-hmm. So while it may be a good thing, but a concern would be, are we getting knowledgeable people to make the kind of decisions that need to be made in a growing community like ours?
Yeah, I can't. I can't speculate on that. The only one can, and I'm just speaking as an old political scientist. One downside of that is that you have an elected body which is not answerable to the mayor.
True.
Now, if you don't like the mayor, that's fine. You're happy. But if you do, you can argue that we've got two governments going at the same time. Okay. And I know there have been circumstances, I'm not going to mention which town, but although I'm tempted, where first selectman is in favor of a project and the P&Z was opposed. Okay. Conversely, if everybody is appointed, then you can see how people would be very much concerned that the mayor has too much power. You know, he appoints all these people and they're all beholden to him, that kind of thing. I haven't found that to be to happen in the real world, but it could. It could.
True.
Yeah. I think we are. I've enjoyed working with both commissions. I like the people on both commissions. I think we have some good people. They put in an enormous amount of time. And I don't think they get quite the credit they should for the work that they do.
Are you an advisor to these commissions?
Oh, yeah. Well, I have staff.
Okay, so your staff helps the commissions
Yes.
in their work?
Oh, yeah.
Taking more than help.
I have one staff member who is assigned to the Planning Commission. She goes to every meeting. And I have a planning assistant who also goes and takes the minutes and distributes material and does all the work of keeping the meeting, helping the chairman keep the meeting going. From time to time, another one of us has to show up for a larger project. And then when you get to the transfer station, it seems like my whole staff is there. Right. The zoning commission I go to. I go to all their meetings, and along with my planning assistant.
Help me understand, and I'm a little confused, and I'm a novice in this whole P&Z area. Mm-hmm. Who is the prime, not authority, but expert or professional who provides guidance and makes sure that the overall city plan is being adhered to or advises those who are making the decision? Is there one person? Is that you?
Ultimately, sure. Although
So you have the knowledge but don't have the authority?
in terms of,
They can...
no, I'm not the zoning czar.
No, but exactly.
No.
Take the planning commission.
Yeah.
Planning commission can do whatever they want, right?
Sure.
The zoning commission can do whatever they want.
Right.
So you could say, here's the city plan.
And
Please adhere to this. And they can say, take a hike.
we can bring up other issues,
Right.
but they don't necessarily have to agree, and sometimes they do not. We'll give you an example, a really good example, I think. Although I've been advised not to, but I will.
Be comfortable, we're just on camera.
I realize that.
Would you like to speak into the mic?
Today, right, turn out. Today, where Best Buy is and Lowe's, that was at one time all zoned like industrial.
Industrial, right.
And it abuts Commerce Park. And it has utilities and highway access and all the rest. I am particularly fighting what I think is a rearguard action to try to preserve as much light industrially zoned land in the city because it's our future economic base. And yet, time after time after time, we get proposals in to rezone that land for either commercial development or for multifamily development. And time after time after time, we oppose it, and we're often overturned. Now,
By whom?
by the zoning commission.
Zone.
In this particular case, planning, I believe, their recommendation was not to rezone it to general commercial. We recommended not to rezone it to general commercial. One of our biggest concerns was traffic, because commercial development generates far more traffic than industrial development. But the zoning commission approved it. So we lost all that industrial land, and we gained more commercial development. We have a huge amount of commercial development in Danbury. And, but it is because of the demand for it, just like because of the demand for condominiums, it's far more valuable for a property owner to have it zoned multifamily or for retail. And so they're looking at a short-term gain. And since this is a long-range plan, we're looking at the long-range implications for the future growth and development of the city. And that's the conflict, and then we lost.
On this zoning commission, are there land use experts sitting on that?
No.
There are not.
I mean, there are some realtors on there, but I think that's the closest it gets.
Okay.
Are there opportunities for conflicts of interest in this?
There always are, whether it's appointed or elected. And that's true on any of the land use commissions, because we have two more in the city. We have the ZBA, and we have the Environmental Impact Commission. I'm not saying that there are, but
Right.
I'm saying the opportunities are sure.
That it's there.
Sure.
As we were going through this, I kind of had made a note on elected officials, thinking that the advantage of the elected officials is they could be more independent than appointed officials. But, and obviously if we had just an appointed board, it would give the mayor more clout and we would have less independence. But having been involved in a political party, we're always begging people to get on the zoning commission.
I don't think you have to beg for this one.
So as we get further down the ballot, we're just trying to fill it with names sometimes. So it's clearly a flawed process. And what it seems to me is, as you were going through it, I came in here thinking I would like an elected board, or an appointed board, because the mayor could then vet people and really get dedicated people. And when you talked about the election side, I thought, that's really a good idea, so I'd like to have both.
Yeah.
And it seems like we have both in the present structure.
Well, no. Because the proposal is to combine them, and you can't combine them and have both elected and appointed. You would actually have fewer people involved. Right now, the zoning commission has 9 members and 3 alternates, and the planning commission has 5 members and 3 alternates, and so you're reducing the pool by 8.
It's one of the strong advantages for the proposal.
Yeah. I should mention one more.
Yes.
The zoning commissioners aren't aware of what the planning commission does, as a general rule. They don't go to the hearings. I think Joel will agree with me on that one. They don't show up at the hearings, the meetings, and so it is possible to pass a zoning amendment without thinking about what those repercussions are going to be when an applicant comes in for a special exception approval, because they just don't know. Here they would.
Because they would be on the board.
Yeah.
What you're saying is they're now part of the long-range
Exactly.
process, and they can see that their votes have an
Yeah.
impact short-term that
Yeah.
that may not be coordinated with the long-term.
Right. When someone comes in for a rezoning, we argue this all the time, we cannot, when the guy comes in, oftentimes he comes in with a plan to show us he wants the land rezoned so he can build this. And it's usually a beautiful colored drawing. You know, the trees are full maturity, just grown to 20-foot ground in diameter, overnight. And there they sit, and it looks wonderful. And we tell the zoning commission, don't count on that, because once you rezone, he can bring in something entirely different to the planning commission. He's not beholden to that. But if you have a combined commission, those guys know the issues they deal with, because they deal with them all the time. The major issues. They deal with them all the time. They know those regulations a lot better than the zoning commission does because they have to work with them more. They really work with them.
But in the unified commission, the planning and zoning unified, the guy shows you the pretty pictures, it gets approved by the combined,
Sometimes. Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
And then can't he then, after the fact, build a best buy?
Oh, sure,
instead of
except
the-
everybody on the commission's going to know that. And they're not going to, I don't think they're going to give it quite the weight as one would. And they may know that we're not beholden to it because we're going to be sitting there as staff members saying, hey, you can't really hold them to this. But it's nothing like having that experience.
So your advantage is that you're bringing the zoning people into the planning process, and you think,
And vice versa. And I think that strengthens the whole land use process.
This combined board, this would be, if it were appointed, these would be like voluntary jobs? Or- So these would not be employees?
No.
Would there be an advantage to hiring professional people to perform this function?
I think that's illegal.
It is?
I don't think you could have
There's a statute for the...
I don't think you could have a member of staff. Oops. That's even worse. That could be even worse. I mean, if you want to... What is this thing?
That's the microphone.
Oh, microphone for this.
That guy? Oh. Excuse me.
I think the problem with that we're facing is, how do we know we're going to have qualified people on this commission?
You won't
We
know.
don't.
You don't either way.
You don't know.
You
You
don't
don't know with
either
the
way.
common council either. I mean, they're elected, and people elect people for any reason. We just have to hope and trust that they're going to rise to the occasion and do their job the way they should. Now, I spoke to a couple of people on zoning, on the zoning commission currently, and also who were on previous zoning commissions. And they all felt that it ought to be combined because the zoning commission, as it stands now, operates in the dark most of the time. They have no clue what's going on with the planning commission. And they make all of their decisions without reference to the planning commission or the plan of the city. And they felt like they needed the input on the plan of development. They felt like they were operating in a vacuum.
Yeah. It gives the members a view of the entire process.
but every project that would come for a zoning change would already have its recommendation from the planning commission when it got to the zoning board,
No.
or no?
For amendments?
Any
Yeah.
zoning change.
Yeah.
Does planning look at it first and then say, yes, we think this is great, or we think it's bad, and then
Right.
send it to zoning? So that zoning
It's a
does,
rec-
so
it's a
zoning does have
recommendation.
your opinion
They do.
on everything that they do.
They have staff opinion too, which is usually more verbose.
And then if they vote against it, they need a supermajority to override you. If they are in agreement
Right.
with you, a simple
Right.
majority.
Right.
So how are they in the dark about the overall use then, if they're always getting if everything they're doing has a report attached to it from planning?
Everything they do doesn't have a report from planning.
Yeah, you do. They both get the same report,
Okay.
all right?
I mean, from the planning commission, not from your department.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Were you talking about his department, or were you talking about the planning commission?
Well, I would think both. I would think your department would give a report
To both.
to both.
Right.
So that if I'm on the zoning commission, I'm making a vote, I should have some understanding of what that project is, because I have your report, right?
Yeah, remember that the planning commission also has plan of development. How much each member is aware of everything that's in there, I don't know, but, I mean, we certainly tell them in our review. In fact, we are required to do so. in our report. But I think there's nothing better than having the members themselves being fully aware of both sides of this process. You do have a legislative side, which the Zoning Commission is involved in, but you also have an administrative / enforcement side that the Planning Commission is involved in. And the whole point of this amendment is to bring them together.
You mentioned enforcement. The Planning Commission is in charge of enforcement, or your department?
In the sense that they can turn down a request. They can deny it, okay?
But what if it's approved and then the builder changes his plan? Who enforces?
He can't change his plan, he has to come back. His site plan, he has to come back. Yeah.
It's interesting.
Now, if it's a construction matter, that's the building department, that's a different matter. And we don't get construction drawings.
That's not your issue.
No.
But if it's to be built on a certain area of a site,
Oh, the footprint's got to stay.
if the footprint changes,
They're back.
they're back.
Dennis, the only question I have then is we're losing oversight. That's my biggest concern,
Oversight.
where the public has as many opportunities to hear about a project and then react to that project and lobby for it or against it. Because I just feel like
Public's not losing anything. If they're coming in for an approval of a special exception site plan, they have public hearings at the Planning Commission
Right.
right now.
Under the proposal, they'd have the public hearing at the combined commission. Is that correct?
Precisely.
It's the same hearing.
It's the
just
same
different
thing.
body.
Yes.
Okay. Are they going to lose any hearings
No.
with the combined process? Not one.
No.
So the public will just have as many opportunities to address the decision-making board as it did before there's a combination under this proposal.
That's right. And in addition to that, they get an opportunity to, through the electoral process, to select the people who sit on that commission.
Okay, and your point being that right now, the planning commission is appointed.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that they're not responsive to the public. I'm not making that charge at all. But in this environment that we're in, with so much suspicion about government and how it operates, I think it is incumbent on us to ensure that people feel that they are involved as much as absolutely possible. And I don't know how many times, and I'm sure Joel can probably knows more situations than I do, where the people from the public will say, and I've heard them stand up at public hearings and say, well, I think you've already made up your minds, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Well, I know those members up there haven't made up their minds. But there's that suspicion. And that's after decades of government bashing by people who ought to know better.
Dr. Cronin?
Well, I was just thinking then the focus of your proposal basically leans toward management and communication. The process for that whole managing and communicating more, as a unified force versus somebody out there not knowing
Oh,
what
yeah.
they're doing.
Absolutely. And I think what we said was zoning practice can be easily divorced from the growth policies of the city, including those specified in the Plan of Conservation and Development. It should be evident that understanding land use policies by enacting conflicting zoning regulations is a confusion of means with ends, a practice that threatens the long-term coordinated development of the city. Coordination between planning and zoning can be assured by combining the planning and zoning commissions. And from that came the recommendation of the Plan of Conservation and Development.
And do we have language in here specific to the public sessions for this, would it,
No,
the
they're,
language would stay the same
oh, yeah.
as is current?
Yeah, what it says is that it doesn't alter any of the, any of the regulations that are in effect, and that, and all those duties and responsibilities have to remain, they cannot be inconsistent with the charter as prescribed in the Connecticut General Statutes, which spell out the requirements for public hearings and notices and that sort of thing.
When we get into like language, you're here, or we're proposing this change to this body, the Charter Revision Commission, because the Planning Commission is provided for in Section 5-1 of the Charter. Isn't that what it really comes down to, as to our role?
Well, you have, well, I tried to spell out all the changes.
You did, but
Yeah.
most of them seem to be ordinances. But if I look carefully at the Charter, and I look at state statute,
Yeah.
which I have a habit of doing on occasion, it seems to me that why this has to be a charter issue in Danbury is because our charter happens to provide for the existence of a separate planning commission.
It does, and it does not provide for the election of a combined commission.
Okay.
Right.
Whereas the statute would allow just simply the passage of an ordinance normally to combine planning and zoning. But because it exists in our charter, it's here.
It's an elected body. Yeah. And I'm trying to follow the charter as it is, where they spell out all the elected officials and various details regarding their offices.
Any other questions or comments?
I have.
The only reason it's a question on that is because this is here. So, right.
You had asked for,
Right.
there were other issues which a phone call regarding my department and how all the, because I think you can pass these out, give you an idea of my extensive department, my 6-member department, and on the back is the overall organization chart for the city, so you see where we fit in. And that, you didn't raise the issue, but there were some modifications that I suggested on the charter section dealing with the department. And if you have any questions about that, I'd be glad to answer.
You basically, in the Department of Planning and Zoning section, all you're doing is adding the underlined sections? Is
Yeah.
that- Okay.
Yeah, we're updating it to
Right.
reflect what we actually do.
Okay.
Well, we're doing a little bit more than that. I mean, aren't you making it a little harder to find a planning director?
Yes.
Yeah, if you want to make it easier, take them all out.
But I
And
mean,
guess what you'll get?
well, I know that, but are we making it too hard by
No.
requiring 10 years of experience?
No.
Okay.
No.
Are we in the right, so we're not going to hamstring a future administration
No.
in finding somebody to
No.
fill that role? Okay.
There are plenty of people majoring in it and getting master's degrees in
Well, I'll
city
tell you
planning.
this much, if you hired somebody with...
I know.
All right, let's talk about them both. One, I struck the thing, or related field. What is a related field?
Well,
No.
we could say quite a few things are related.
We sure could, and I wouldn't be happy with a lot of those.
Okay.
The other thing is the number of years' experience, and 5 years is not enough for this job. I can-
Should that be a charter?
That's what, it's in the
It's
charter.
in
It's
there.
5
Yeah,
seats
well,
now.
there's a lot of things in this charter, but should it be, so that means if we really found someone we were in love with and they had 9.5 years, would we not be able to hire them?
That's correct.
Are we, I mean,
Those things, I think, should be left up to the discretion of the administration with concurrence from the Common Council. I think a lot of those job description type things, in my view, would be better off outside the charter.
I would be careful on this one.
Well, the
I would be
rationale
real-
being, suppose you wanted to increase the requirements for a director, and the charter says you need 3 years minimum, and you want to make it 5. Or you got somebody very
Well,
promising and a lot of experience, and like Carlos says, 9.5, you can't hire them. I think it has a tendency to limit in the ability of the administration to hire good people. It's well intended to put in 10 years, but there's some people with 10 years experience, I think you would agree, you'd rather have somebody with 8 years experience. There's more than just a year's experience. There's other qualifications that goes into the mix, and I think you would agree.
No, I don't agree. I think the danger in this kind of position is that you get somebody who's not qualified because they're either friends, they know people, they have influence, there's nepotism involved, those kinds of things, which I think are far more dangerous to the process than what you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Believe me, you will get applicants with far more than 10 years. It's a well-paid position, but it is a position that requires a lot of experience. I have 34 years of experience, and it's still a challenge.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Dennis, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
I do have another question. Is there anyone else we should speak to, in your opinion,
Oh, yeah, that was,
regarding combining planning and zoning?
You had talked to members of the commissions, I guess? So,
Members of either commission?
who's the chairman of the zoning commission?
Ted Farrar is the chairman.
Okay, because I would think we
Might invite him.
I think we can.
But he was not on the zoning commission when all this came up and was discussed. I might, although the chairman of the planning commission was, but he was on the zoning commission at the time.
And who's that?
That's Arnie Finaldi.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know what their opinions are. Okay. I do know that when this was adopted, that both commissions were in favor of it. It's kind of an interesting process. We have hundreds of recommendations in this plan, and only a couple engendered discussion. The Ives Trail, for example, that was one, or a couple of others. But this one, the combination probably got the most. And it was very interesting, the response, because people, the response to me, at any rate, people didn't seem interested in discussing the advantages of combining the commissions and why we were looking at that. They immediately jumped to, well, is it going to be elected or appointed? So right away, we jumped into the political fray.
Yeah.
And to which I said, I'm not going to take a position on that. That's a political position. Now, the mayor prefers to be elected, but you can argue the case. Make another argument if you so desire.
City manager.
Right. Thank you, Dennis.
Okay.
Thank you, Dennis.
Very nice job.
Professional.
Very good. Mr. Gottschalk, did you have anything you wanted to?
Oh, I have handouts.
Before we get to Mr. Gottschalk, to finish up on this, we're talking about other individuals to appear. Would it be helpful to get an outside point of view from somebody, a land use attorney or some authority, very used, I'm sure they have a different perspective of things, but in...
Oh, let's not.
No. I just caught what you said. Please, retain your dignity here. But would it serve a purpose from the user side to get somebody that would have a perspective on this? We've heard from the public, but the people who are affected by this as well.
I would love to get people that had to go before both and had won or lost on both, but
What about people who have this already in place in their own community? Another one, you mentioned other communities that have it combined. What about getting input from
Thoughts, Rick?
those communities?
You might try universities. There are professors who specialize in the law of planning and zoning. I don't know, I have no one in mind, but academia is a potential source of information. The land use bar is another source of information. Members of the two commissions seems like a logical place to go to me.
What do you think, Chair?
I think we should issue an invitation to both commissions and ask them to come in and speak to us.
Anybody outside that, then?
Anybody interested?
I think we should make sure we get somebody from the commissions who voted on this whole thing to start with.
2002.
When was that first brought up? Back then.
Ken Kelman. Ken is still on the planning commission. He's a
Teacher.
Yes.
social science teacher
Right.
at the high school. Arnie Finaldi, who was on the zoning commission at the time.
And is on the planning commission. Arnie's been on the zoning commission for a long time, so prior to this.
Right.
Okay, we'll work on that to try to get them perhaps at the next meeting. We'll issue an invitation probably to
I think
both.
he's talking to you.
Okay, so I'll write that down.
I wrote it down. I know. Peter's my left hand. Okay, Mr. Gottschalk, do you have any tradition breaking going on here tonight?
I'm sorry?
Any tradition breaking going on?
Oh, no, it's the same old tradition of handouts. Before we get on to anything new, I thought I would give you some background material on planning and zoning so that you would read a little bit about what you've been hearing about this evening. The first is a section, two sections from the statutes. One is 7-193. It provides for the combination of planning and zoning by charter. And interestingly, if you make a note to take a look at subsection B, you'll find that you have some additional flexibility in terms of how you craft the method of election, appointment, or organization of this new combined body. And at the same time, I thought it would be a good idea to give you a copy of section 8-4, which has specific language in it dealing with the combination of planning and zoning. 7-193 is kind of a general language dealing with amendments to charters when it comes to boards, agencies, commissions, officers, departments. And finally, I wanted to give you a copy of the section of the Code of Ordinances that talks about the Planning Commission.
And can I ask you this question while you're off giving us statutes and ordinances? Since I can't seem to find these unless I know where I'm looking for them, are there any special acts regarding Danbury's planning or zoning?
Not that I'm aware of.
Boards that, okay, I couldn't find it. No, not for that.
So to answer your question, Peter, two sections of the charter are implicated here. One dealing with the election of the zoning commission now, and 2-2, and 5-1 dealing with the planning commission. So both would need to be changed. You're going to combine the two functions. Now, I noted in the agenda that you had intended tonight to talk about Chapter 1 and the borrowing section, is that correct? And I also...
Change language.
Yes. Well, let me just, shall I go into that now?
Yes.
I can't remember which one appears first on the agenda.
The borrowing.
7-10.
7-10. I have a handout.
Surprise.
Yeah. This is just, I wasn't here last time, and I regret that.
You were sorely missed.
I was on a mission of mercy. This handout is intended just to reflect what you did as I understood it. If you did something else, or if you want to do something other than this, let me know. And you know, as I hand these things out, we will get to the end of the process, and you should have a mirror of what I have, which is a big folder containing little folders, each of them dealing with something you did. And so it should be a relatively easy chore to put together a draft report based on each of these. At least that's what I'm hoping for.
Point of clarification, is this now open for discussion, this 7-10 section, since it's on our agenda?
Well,
Why isn't it?
I think we can talk about this language that's in here.
Right.
This,
Yeah, right.
Yep.
The language it's in where?
in this, in this.
Can we amend this language in here?
I don't, well,
Can we add to it?
Is that a question to me?
Yes.
You can do either one.
well, this was voted on, and my understanding was that if you wanted to change this, it would have to be brought up by a person who voted on the majority side of this. Am I?
If you wanted to change
That
the...
applies if you intend to take action at the same session, because you have, each of your meetings is a separate session. According to Robert's rules, none of that applies, and you can revisit this any number of times.
Oh, okay.
Although you may
You just
have a
ruined
natural
somebody's
disinclination
night.
to do that.
Yes.
Hope some of us
so
have an
we can-
inclination to do it.
We have a,
Before we even do that,
Yes.
the language that's in here is not totally what we
Yeah, let's take a look at
agreed
that.
upon.
what's the change that you're saying?
What we said, according
Go ahead.
to my notes, we had the question about whether it was per project or per annum, and we decided to keep it as per annum,
No.
2.5.
No, you're incorrect. Because that question was asked directly to Peter. And Peter says those are the only changes. The only change that he made and was voted on was 500,000 was changed to 2.5 million. And if I'm incorrect, tell me, Peter.
On TV.
That's what we voted on.
Was Dr. Cronin here? Were you here?
This is what you voted
Okay.
on.
The only thing we voted
There was
on
a
was to
discussion.
change the
There was a
500,000.
discussion, John, about that.
Okay.
There were several concerns raised about, that level and leaving it open to interpretation. You're absolutely right in that regard, but with the final passage, the only thing was changed was the 2.5.
That's correct.
Yeah, let's make sure, because we have some members that weren't here last time.
Correct.
And we
I
did,
don't
and we did have that
think-
discussion. And all we did is we
Right.
raised the $500,000 number
That's the only thing that
to
changed.
$2,500,000. And very specifically, we did not put in an annual cap or any other kind of cap.
Okay.
And there, but we did put that to a vote.
I think so.
Since this can come up for discussion, Any other changes to what anyone was thinking on this?
On this language, I have an addition to this section that I would like to bring forward.
Do you need to do that in the form of a motion?
I don't know. Somebody advise me.
Yeah, yes.
Is it something we would vote on?
Well, why don't we read it first, and then we can take it up and have a discussion. Should we make a motion that we will review this and have a discussion over it, but we don't have to accept it? Unless it's passed.
Certainly. Make it as a motion, then.
I'll make a motion that we review a potential addition to this language. Not a change in language, an addition to the language.
Okay, motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second?
Second. And would you read the language that you are thinking about?
Do we have to vote on this first, that we're going to do it or not? No.
We're going to have a discussion about it?
I think we can have the
We
discussion
can have a
first.
discussion. Let me pass out. What I'm going to propose is at the end of that paragraph, after voting districts, that the following be added.
Do you have extras for?
Yes. A word of caution.
We'll take that.
The percentages to be verified with the Director of Finance. In effect, what this does is, at our last meeting, the Director of Finance encouraged us not to pass a revision to this without placing some sort of cap or trigger mechanism that would automatically go to the public for a referendum. At the end of the last meeting when we passed this, it was with the understanding that in good faith, when this was passed, the 2.5, that the precedent had always been that that was viewed as the maximum amount annually that administrations would go for. We've heard tonight that that is no longer the case, and that the mayor is perfectly within his legal rights to submit for projects of $500,000 and does not meet the trigger of going to a referendum. What my proposal would do would be to cap at a percentage of the grand list, a figure that if in any given year the cum borrowing or bonding exceeded that, all subsequent bonds would be automatically subject to a public referendum. This number, if my math is correct, and Doctor, you're going to have to check me on this, the figure is 7.4 billion.
She's a reading specialist.
And I think it comes up to about 5.1 million cap. That's why I want this to be verified. I have not discussed this with anyone, with the Director of Finance or anything. This would provide a workable guideline in the view of the Financial Director vis-a-vis his last meeting with us, and would accommodate the cap. It would no way change what Peter recommended, the $2.5 million.
Okay. If I can ask a question, then, instead of doing this where we've got to do the math, and obviously this number will rise as the grand list rises, why not just make it an annual cap so that it's very clear that we can go to $2.5 million, and anything above that the mayor has to go before the voters?
That's another option.
My fear is the complication, that's all.
Well, your point is well taken. My intent here was not to alter what the commission voted on at the last meeting, rather to add clarity to a cap.
Okay. Other comments?
That's why I chose this route.
Comments?
I agree with you that you should keep it simple and just make it per year.
Dr. Cronin, any concern? Joan? Any questions or comments about any of this?
I would just as soon not get into higher mathematics and keep it as an annual.
Okay. Do you feel we should, well, we have a motion on the floor, so we should talk about this. Do we want to make this motion tonight, or do we want to wait till more members are here? Because one of my concerns is we were short some people last time.
Just one of the things I'd like to discuss further about is if we choose to make this $2.5 million an annual amount. One of the things that we were faced with was over a period of time, inflation catches up, and we're in this bind, and even if we do add the language to the charter that is revised or revisited every 10 years, in 10 years this number on a present value will be much smaller than $2.5 million. So, I think that we ought to try to build in, as we've talked over the past few meetings, some sort of an index that allows us to grow with CPI or something, rather than holding it as a fixed number. Because that's where we were at this charter, as you recall, Mr. Chairman, that what opened this whole debate that the $500,000 was inadequate, and I suspect 5-6 years down the road we're going to be saying the same thing about the $2.5 million, although it's a nice neighborhood to live in.
Yeah. Okay. Peter, any comments or concerns, questions?
Yeah, I think this. I mean, we're looking at this as if by doing this, any one person can go out and issue bonds. This is still a representative democracy in the city of Danbury. There's a council, there's a mayor. The mayor proposes, the council gets to vote on it. It's all done by ordinance. And at that point, although the number or the percentages for a petition are sort of insurmountable, I mean, by anybody who circulated a petition, I've done that on occasion, it's a very difficult thing to do, there's still an ability to get a petition. In any event, if somebody goes reckless with bonding, and the population's ire is raised, in 2 years, they're out of office. So I think this. I think that by putting some kind of cap, annual or otherwise, you're hamstringing a municipality that in the past, in its past record of many decades, has not recklessly bonded or spent money in the city of Danbury. At $2.5 million, you can't do a big project. You can't build a police station. You can't build some kind of, or acquire some large piece of land. But you can replace a bridge that might fail. You can replace a roof that might fail. And if the mayor or any politician wants to try to get into a budget, a series of small bonding projects that it seems to be a novel idea, that's a political policy decision. And the political policy can be influenced one way or another by the electorate, by the council, or by an election. And I strongly believe that this document, our charter, has to be flexible a little bit. It has to allow for democracy to work. And I think by just leaving it, the number alone, and then maybe revisiting it every 10 years or some regular portion by a charter review commission, we can do that. And that's my strong feeling on this.
Peter, this is the same as giving an administration a blank check.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is, because they can write $2.5 million projects as many times as the Common Council is willing to pass them.
Well, then it's not a blank check if the Common Council has to vote on it.
But hear me through. Without public approval. Now, if that's what we intend to do here, that's the result of what we have voted on last week, or the last meeting.
Well,
it does do that, and we've seen that in action already. So when you talk about history and precedents, the precedent has been broken with this current budget presentation by the mayor.
It hasn't been voted on yet, has it?
You want to bet that it doesn't pass?
Well, that's neither here nor there. Any other comments? So we have some choices. We have a motion on the floor. Any other discussion? Because we can vote this up or down as is. We can table it. if you want to table it for clarification.
I think what
So
we're
any
voting
more
on-
discussion?
I think you might, you said yourself there were some people that weren't here, and now there's some that are not here now. Might be better to get the option to be around the table than...
Any other
think about-
discussion?
If it's something of this importance, we should have a larger majority of the commission here.
Okay.
Point to be made, Diane, is what you see in front of you, this language, has already passed.
The 2.5 million has already passed.
Right.
This piece has not passed.
Right.
Okay,
Now, we can open this at any time,
right.
so we don't have to decide anything tonight. But
Well,
as
we have a
it's-
motion
as
on the
it-
floor,
as
so
it's-
so we've got to vote that up, down,
Right.
or
The
table.
motion is to add some language. If you don't want to do that, that's fine.
Okay. And I'll hand my gavel to you, Bob, for a second. I will tell you, I would vote against this for tonight, but I do want to revisit it because I do think we do need some kind of cap in it. And next time we have the discussion, I will not call on Peter Buzade.
Fair enough.
He's eloquent, isn't he? All right, any more discussion? All right, all in favor of approving this motion as it is before you, I won't reread it, signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Nay.
The motion does not carry, but thank you, Bob, that's yours. I think we should have more discussions and probably have David St. Hilaire in again, and we'll revisit this. But thank you all. Okay, we did sections 710 and 12, and then we're going to talk about various Danbury entities that may be governed by the charter or by special legislative act.
We skipped,
No, 1-2, we didn't talk.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, our preamble.
Our preamble and our thing about the, and Rick has some input on
Yeah, we
that.
asked Rick for one map. One map.
I know. You'd think it'd be easy. So I wrote to the engineering department on the subject of the map.
Does
And
everyone know what that is? That we were going to take away that wordy beginning and have a nice, concise map because we were going to fix the whole charter.
yeah. And I knew they had something because they developed the language that you find objectionable. So where did that come from? Well, I frankly have not seen the file, but I wrote an email to the engineering department asking whether or not there was a map on file in the land records to which we could refer instead of having a long description. No, such thing does not exist. There may be compilations of maps. In fact,
In the language for that.
yeah, that takes longer to describe. In fact, yesterday, I got a call from Fareed Corey, the city engineer, who had Paul Fagan on the line. And Fareed was asking Paul if he would be interested in bidding on such a job of creating this map.
Oh, no.
I asked him to not do that right away.
No.
Because I thought you all might take a different approach. What I was told, however, during this relatively brief conversation was that it would be very expensive to do this thing. So that's where I ended my big map conversation.
Shouldn't the
So
city
let's
of
leave the
Danbury
language
have a...
alone.
You know what?
Yeah, that comes
Can I
in.
ask this
Never mind.
question? Do we need to have a legally accepted, as in a deed type description for the environment of the city of Danbury? Is that, for the geography of the city of Danbury, does it need to be a legal description?
Do you mean, do we need to have what's contained in 1-2?
That's
now?
correct.
No, we do not.
Okay, do we need to refer to an A2 survey, which would replace a meets and bounds description, to have a...
The property description of the city of Danbury comes up occasionally. In fact, it's our view of what the boundary is between the city of Danbury and the town of Ridgefield is not the state of Connecticut's view of it. And they calculate it for purposes of reimbursement or
For the area of the city.
grants.
Okay.
They go by mileage of roads, for example. So, although I don't remember what decade it was, although there were people hired to go and walk the boundaries and find the markers and confirm exactly what the boundaries are. It never made it into a map. And whether the charter says it or not, it's knowable.
Okay.
The
I'm going to
monuments exist.
I'm going to rephrase the question. Okay. Does the geographic description of the city of Danbury that is in the present charter in section 1-2 determine whether or not a person is a resident of the city of Danbury, or is that determined somewhere else? Do you understand my question?
I understand your question. I just am wondering what I'm going to give you as an answer. But I'm not sure.
I'm trying to find out whether or not we need to put this long section in the charter.
You have examples. You've seen examples that have been passed out before of charters in other municipalities
With no
that
mention
don't
of
have
all.
this.
That's correct.
Whether somebody is a resident of the city of Danbury by virtue of being within the jurisdictional limits isn't, I don't think, dependent on that document.
That's my question. Okay.
They aren't based on what the actual meets and bounds are, whether that description is in your charter or not.
Yeah. I would just ask the commissioners, do we want to go through this thing and pull out stuff or have the discussion on things that aren't germane to running the city at this point? Because we're in the middle of April.
I don't want to waste a lot of time on this. I mean, if this doesn't need to be here.
If it doesn't need to be here, we don't have to have it here, but why take it out if it's not hurting anything other than someone actually doing research on this actually has to read through it from time to time?
Fair enough.
So my
Paul
feeling
Fagan didn't even know it was in there. He managed to get through a whole career
of
doing
surveying
surveys in Danbury
Without knowing it.
without knowing that. Yeah,
And we don't even know if that's accurate.
right.
According to the engineering department, although there are typographical errors in there, which I will one day correct, it's accurate.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then,
We
Any
already
others?
voted to take it out.
It's accurate and it's not hurting.
oh, I didn't think we voted to take it out.
I think
But
we
we did
did.
fix all that.
All right.
Well, we voted to take it out and add it with a map, and then we found out there was no map. Was that not what we did?
Yes.
So we can reverse
changed
our
the
vote
language.
at some point. Does anyone want to do that today? Or do we want to just move on?
Let's move on.
Moving on. Okay. Next on the agenda. Mr. Gottschalk.
There was the preamble issue, which I missed, and my understanding of your minutes was that the preamble should match the mission statement,
Yes.
That was the idea.
so I found it. Here it is.
Thank you.
Is there any feedback on that proposal from anybody? Have you heard?
None that I heard, no. No, but I will tell you that
didn't
as
hear.
I prepared this, there was something not quite right about it, in my opinion. And so I want you to do it if you like it, but this, to me, sounds like something spoken by a municipal official. And I'm not sure that that's what you want in the charter. I mean, perhaps the speaker ought to be a citizen. You know, it says, "We are committed to working with citizens." Well, who's "we" in this document? I'm not really sure who it ought to be.
That's true.
So I just raise it for you to think about.
That's a very good point. Constitution, we the people. We the
Right.
residents or the citizens of Danbury.
It's not as if the president is
Right.
talking. I promise to be good to you people.
The residents of Danbury.
Peter, would you want to take a kick at this thing?
Sure.
So,
A rewrite.
a rewrite?
Using the same ideas.
Right.
Okay.
Wonderful.
I'll call
Mr.
on you for
Chairman.
that then, Peter. We'd like lofty language, if you would.
Would you like me to go through some of
Something
the other
equivalent to
charters and
four
get
score and
examples?
7 years ago.
Yeah, that would be great.
Is this,
We're on section 1, right?
Sentences will do here. Let's just take out that "we."
There was another thing that we talked about in section 1. I don't know if that's on the agenda or not. And that was the notion of the form of government, to state it up front, the mayor-council form of government. Do you recall that?
I don't think I included that in the minutes, Bob. That's my bad.
Here is, and I said I'd give you some wording around that. And Rick, here is for you. And maybe if you want to discuss this now, Mr. Chairman, or...
Sure, let's do
later.
it.
It was just brief, and it was simply to state that the form of government that the city has elected to govern itself. The point was, it was covered under elections, the duties and responsibilities, so it was implied there. The idea here was to put it up in the founding section 1, that this is the form of government in which the city would operate. You know, whatever wording is appropriate, this is the first stab at it. So if you want to pursue that, fine. If you want to just
Are we
shelve it,
fixing things that
that's
need
fine,
not
too.
be fixed?
No, we're adding something. We're adding something to make something clear.
Okay.
So, could we do without it? Yes. Is it improved by it? I would say, you know, it may be worth putting in, but
Do we need Mr. Gottschalk to give us language that we would put in then?
Similar to that.
Okay. Do we want a motion to that effect? Don't we need a motion?
so moved.
We're moving, Mr. Gottschalk, to add section 1.5 to the Danbury Charter that would define our...
Well, excuse me, it would be, we change section 1.4 to section 1.5 and insert section 1.4, this new one, simply because it was felt that this should come before section 4. So we'd have to move section 4 to section 5.
Very clear. Right here. Would you take a look at... Oh, you've got it.
Got it.
Okay, a motion's been made and seconded that we move section 1.4 to section 1.5, add a new section 1.4 as noted here, and that we would have Mr. Gottschalk kind of frame the language for us in a more appropriate manner. Make it a little bit more lawyerly, if you would.
Okay.
Any other? Yeah.
No, not longer.
Any discussion? The motion's been made and seconded. All in
Well,
favor?
it does clarify what form of government we have fairly clearly and upfront. In that sense, in terms of making the document a little useful, it's a good idea.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Opposed? Motion carries. One dissenting vote. You didn't like? Okay. Anything else that needs to come before the commission at this point? We did have a short discussion last meeting about communicating with the rest of city government, because updating them on where we were.
Oh, yes.
Why don't we make that an agenda item for our next meeting?
Stuff away, I didn't think I needed it.
And then we should also start with a couple of new agenda items. So Peter, I'll get in touch with you this week, and we'll try to get a hold of Arnie Finaldi and Ted Farah and Ken Keller and maybe a couple of others.
Okay.
Do we want to invite the city clerk in, or is that a little premature?
We've invited her 3 times. I'll invite her again.
Let's ask her for dates, instead of just saying, can you make this week, just get a date that would work with her, because we do need to start that. And then shall we start the organizational review, or is that's going to take quite a while? We've just done preamble, which we had talked about, so we've started that. Planning and zoning we're in the middle of. Bonding we're 75% through. Shall we start the discussion on municipal elections at the next meeting?
Is that on our? Yeah, you had that list.
Yes.
When did we have, was that what was next? Yes.
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 So you want to put that on, add that to the agenda item for the
You know,
April
For the next-
28th meeting?
Is this-
You know, I would suggest we resolve this bonding issue before we attack term limits. That could have some bearing on it.
Okay. So first item on the agenda will be to finalize bonding. Do you think we'll be ready by then?
So this is for the April 28th.
Yep. We will continue the planning and zoning discussion.
Okay.
We will then get a date from the city clerk when she might want to come meet with us, and then possibly the treasurer, not that it would be the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay? And then we'll hold in abeyance the municipal elections until we figure out where we are with bonding. And then we're going to have to do the organizational review, which will take some time. But that's kind of our agenda that we had thought about, at least. And I'm sorry, Peter, add to that, we're going to review our communication to the city, and we'll get that out to...
That's for 428?
Yes. Okay?
Before we adjourn for tonight, I thought we were going to discuss with Rick whether or not there are any special act agencies that the charter impacts. For example, the parking authority is both in the charter and a creature of special act. Is there anything similar to that in city government?
I'm sorry, you're right.
I
missed that.
don't recall any,
Okay.
but I really haven't.
Richter Authority would be?
Richter is not by special act.
Okay.
Richter was created, the authorities that we have are the parking authority, Richter, Harry Wow. That's an agency, not an authority. And Charles Ives. Except for the parking authority. All those other authorities are recreational authorities established pursuant to the general statutes, not special acts.
Okay.
So I think, if your question is limited to authority,
That's my question.
parking authority is the one.
Bob, we were just worried if there was anything else that we needed to look at that comes under city government more efficiently.
The one thing that we were talking about with regard to these authorities goes back to this, ties into the bonding with I don't know that we resolved that. And that was the state created a special act stating that the parking authority could issue bonds for a new building.
Okay.
And without going to a referendum. And that they could come to the Common Council and ask for good faith backing, which made the city of Danbury liable. And we were wondering, did we want, if they did that, would we want that to fall under the provisions of the bonding? Meaning, if it was above a certain threshold area, it would have to go to referendum. I think that was the one question that remains open. I don't believe we've decided anything along those lines yet, Peter.
Okay.
I think we were waiting for some feedback from Rick. I think we got that in the fact that we can override that special statute that's in the state. So if we choose to do that, we legally can do it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So if we choose to do something about it, we can. If we choose not to, then we don't have to do anything.
Fair enough.
So what?
So we're satisfied with that, or we need more research?
No, I think we got the research.
Were you going to tell us something?
I thought you were at the end of the paragraph, but you're not. I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm done.
There's one other dangling conversation that we have, and that concerns...
Do you have a handout?
Don't encourage him.
I do. No, I don't.
People can't get copies of the city budget, but we get a handout.
We're up to 8,000 trees already, I just want you to know.
I do want to adjourn quickly because I want Dennis to want to get on this commission
is very
instead of
short,
being on...
and I'm not going to propose that you do anything tonight. But do you remember the handout called Charter Corrections Revised?
Yes.
Yes. One of those had to do with that first meeting in December, the organizational meeting.
Right.
Right.
And what we